There is something happening that I don't know if people have been paying attention to this. And I want to bring this to your attention. I told you guys, RFK Jr.'s campaign to me is sus. It's very weird to me. I'm supposed to believe that you want to be anti-war, you're the pro-peace candidate, which he did say, but you're okay with the US giving weapons to Israel to fight if they need be. You seem to be okay with the state of Israel in reference to what they're doing to the Palestinian people. It just doesn't make sense. Well, now something else has happened. Because you see now, Ron DeSantis has gone on record to say that he would actually consider adding RFK Jr. to his cabinet. Now, why is that important? Number one, you need to know that both RFK Jr. and Ron DeSantis have been backed financially by billionaire David Sacks. David Sacks, the same guy that you see on that All In podcast, the same guy who owned Call In before he sold it to Rumble, but he's now on the board at Rumble. David Sacks has gone on record in interview saying that financially he is backing Ron DeSantis and RFK Jr. This does not make any sense to me. He has hosted fundraisers for RFK Jr. He's hosted fundraisers for Ron DeSantis. And so now when you see something like this article here, which says that DeSantis suggests he could pick RFK Jr. to lead the FDA or the CDC. You see this? Now, RFK Jr. is running as a Democrat, right? What's this really about? So listen to this. I'm going to make this larger because the text, tiny. You guys can see it now. Okay. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who is struggling to gain steam in the GOP primary, mused on Wednesday in an interview with Clay Travis on Outkick that he generally aligns with Kennedy's conservative views about the pandemic. Those views, DeSantis indicated, could make him a pick to lead a federal agency with medical jurisdiction. So you mean to tell me there are no conservative people that Ron DeSantis can choose? Is it a mere coincidence that Ron DeSantis just happens to pick someone or would like to pick someone that also has the same donor as him? Let's continue. If you're president, sick him on the FDA if he'd be willing to serve, or sick him on the CDC. In terms of being Veep, if there's 70% of the issues that he may be averse to our base on, that just creates an issue. Kennedy, who remains a long shot for the Democratic presidential nomination, has aired contentious views over, we're not going to say that here, having questioned their effectiveness, etc. Let me go skip down to this part here. It wasn't long before DeSantis' remarks were slammed by one of his Republican opponents. Former Vice President Mike Pence on Wednesday evening called out DeSantis on the social media platform X, formerly known as Twitter, though it wasn't RFK Jr.'s questionable rhetoric the former head of the White House task force took issue with. He said, "When I am president, I will only consider pro-life Americans to lead FDA, CDC, or HHS," is what Mike Pence said in his post. To be clear, pro-abortion Democrats like RFK Jr. would not even make this list. DeSantis' comments fit into the governor's ongoing criticism of the federal bureaucracy, which has described over recent years as being too woke and corrupted. DeSantis has pledged to abolish several government agencies and departments if elected president, including the IRS and the Department of Education. I don't buy this for one bit. I don't believe Ron DeSantis, and I don't believe RFK Jr. I don't think either one of them are going to actually try to do this. I think they're saying the things that actually feed into their base, that their base want to hear. They know there's an appetite for this right now. And so that's why they're saying these things. Conservatives like Ron DeSantis have railed against health-related agencies in particular, animating fervor over related lockdowns. As Florida governor, DeSantis has waged a verbal and legal war against the CDC and the FDA, two agencies with broad jurisdiction, health matters, that he was especially targeted during the pandemic. Now, for him to consider someone like RFK Jr., I want you to see his foreign policy takes, because this does not make any sense. So he had an interview recently with Jake Tapper, and I want to get to the part here where he talks about foreign policy, because to me, this just does not make any sense. Let me, 1 second. I hate, like, YouTube is weird with this thing. Okay, here we go. Now stay there. Okay. Let's get into this part of the discussion, because this is where he's going to talk about foreign policy. Now, he wants to add someone like RFK Jr. to his cabinet. They don't even agree when it comes to foreign policy. So listen to this.
So let's turn to foreign policy, because obviously that goes hand in hand with military policy in many ways. As a congressman in 2015, you strongly backed arming Ukraine after Russia invaded and seized Crimea. As a presidential candidate, you've said that the conflict is not a vital national interest. So as president, what will your policy be? Will you want to stop arming Ukraine? Will you stop financial support for Ukraine?
So first, a vital national interest to me means we would potentially send troops there. And I don't think anybody wants to see troops in Ukraine. And I would believe that in 2015 as well. It's more of a secondary or tertiary interest. So my policy is going to be very simple. Our number one threat to our country is from China in terms of foreign threat. We also have a threat of being able to not secure our own border. Tens of thousands of people are dying every year because the cartels are running fentanyl. So you got to be strong at home if you want to be strong abroad. We are going to approach the world instead of Europe being the focus like it has been since World War II. And it was understandable why it would be after World War II. NATO, stopping the Soviets, I get it. But now the Asia Pacific really needs to be to our generation what Europe was to the post-World War II generation. And so what we're doing is how much hard power can we marshal as much as possible to deter China. I think we're in a situation now with how weak we've been that we are going towards maybe having a conflict with China.
Let me pause here for a second. You see, this is one of those examples where when people say, oh, Republicans, they are anti-war. And I always say, like, no, just because someone disagrees with this conflict with Russia and Ukraine doesn't mean they disagree with the conflict with another country like China. All you have to do is replace Ukraine with China, and there you go. So I want to explain something to you and make this very clear. Ron DeSantis here is pivoting. First and foremost, when he was asked about foreign policy, he started to pivot towards immigration. He started to talk about the border, not focusing specifically on the question at hand. Then he wants to bring in the China issue. The point that I'm trying to make to you is this. Ron DeSantis is not anti-war. He is not anti-imperialist. I don't understand why Ron DeSantis would even consider putting someone like RFK Jr. to be a part of his cabinet, other than the fact that they are both funded by billionaire David Sachs. RFK Jr. is a capitalist. For all these people who continue to tell me, oh, he's anti-establishment. No, he's a capitalist. He may not like the way that capitalism has become today, but that hasn't stopped him from hanging out with billionaires, taking money from billionaires. He is not, anti-capitalist. And so here you have Ron DeSantis. And so another thing I want to point out, and we talked about this on Call-In. If you pay very close attention here, you notice that RFK Jr. has not been on any show that has a left audience. Let me explain what I mean by that. Just because a host is left doesn't mean their audience is left. He was on Russell Brand. He was on Glenn Greenwald. But the audience, the majority is conservative. He was on Rising. He was on Breaking Points. But the majority of the audience is conservative. Why haven't you seen RFK Jr. on the Gray Zone? Max has invited him multiple times, publicly as well. Why haven't you seen RFK Jr. on Katie Halper's show? Why doesn't RFK Jr. want to talk to any Jewish people that disagree with him and his position in reference to Israel and Palestine? Have you noticed this? Why haven't you seen him on Bad Faith? I'm just naming the big ones. Forget about me. Forget about RBN for a minute. I'm just naming the big platforms that everybody would go on to. Think about that. Have you seen him on Crystal, Kyle and Friends? No. What's happening there? Very strange. Very odd. What you are seeing RFK Jr. do is you're seeing him go into shows that have a conservative audience and shows that have conservative hosts. He's on Fox News every time you turn around. Again, nothing wrong with that. But he's actively avoiding people that I know have reached out to his campaign. People talk. All of us have been told the same thing. You're in the queue. Why is he avoiding these shows? He's gone on to libertarian podcasts. In fact, he's gone into a friend podcast of mine that I know. And this is not a subscriber issue. He's gone on to shows smaller than RBN. Just not those that have a left audience. What is that about? So my theory is that I believe that RFK Jr. is trying to win over some of the hesitant Trump voters, the ones who may have voted for Trump just because, but may be looking to turn elsewhere. I think those are the people he's actually going after. Now, why is he running through the Democratic Party? That is a really good question. Maybe because he's trying to get people to join the Democratic Party. What do I mean by that? Well, depending on what state you live in, if you're a conservative and you want to vote for RFK Jr. in the Democratic primary, you may have to change your voter registration from Republican to Democrat. These are the things people don't tell you. But the fact that you see him align with the same donor as Ron DeSantis, and now you see Ron DeSantis saying, oh yeah, I would add RFK Jr. to my campaign. What is really going on here? Let's play a little bit more. And then I have something else to say as well.
I think the way to deter that conflict with China is to be strong. So I would have the Europeans do more in Europe. That's more in their backyard. That's more of an interest for them. You know, I would be willing to be helpful to try to bring it to a conclusion there, but I am not going to diminish our stocks and not send to Taiwan. I'm not going to make us less capable to respond to exigencies. And you got to care at least as much about your own border as you do about foreign borders.
So when you talk about trying to bring an end to the conflict, would you push Zelensky to make concessions to Russia to cede land that Russia seized in its attack?
So what I would say is what the goal should be a sustainable, enduring peace in Europe, but that one that does not reward aggression. And there's going to be different levers that you're going to be able to pull. We will pull some levers against Russia. We're going to be much more aggressive on energy and export, because I think that's been Putin's lifeline. I want the Europeans dependent on the United States for that, not him. We're also going to
This is the part that doesn't make any sense to me. He says he wants the Europeans to be dependent on the United States when it comes to exports, but when it comes to conflict, he wants them to be on their own and deal with their own backyard.
They're going to turn the screws on the Iranians. The Iranians have been one of Putin's biggest benefactors, and they've benefited from Biden's approach there. So we'll use the leverage that we have, but the goal is going to be a sustainable peace that does not reward aggression.
What do you say to the argument that Xi Jinping is watching the U.S. response to Ukraine to game out how the U.S. would respond if China invaded Taiwan? President Biden has said that U.S. forces would defend Taiwan if China invaded. Would you do the same? Would you order the U.S. military to defend Taiwan?
Well, two things. So first, how does China view this? I mean, it's somewhat speculative. I think what they would like to see in Russia, Ukraine is a multi-year stalemate and quagmire where the West is pouring in 100 billion, another $200 billion of weapons. Our stocks continue to decline. They don't really care about the Russians. Russia will be more dependent on China as a result of that. So I think that's what Xi would like to see ideally. Now, in terms of Taiwan, that is a significant interest of the United States. Taiwan is a strong ally. Taiwan is important for us economically and for a variety of other reasons. Also, a potential Chinese attack on Taiwan successfully would have big reverberations in the Asia Pacific. But our policy is going to be very simple. We're going to deter that from happening. China respects hard power. If you have hard power, if you have strong alliances with the Japanese, I visited there a few months ago. The Koreans and the Japanese are getting along now. They never used to get along because they both see the threat posed by China. So we're going to work together. We're going to be much stronger. We're going to project power, and we're going to deter that from happening.
Let's talk about some issues here.
He didn't answer the question, guys. This is very telling. What Jake Tapper was asking him is that he said that Joe Biden said that U.S. troops would be ready to defend Taiwan if China were to attack Taiwan. Would you do the same? Long story short, he never answered that question. So it's just, Ron DeSantis numbers continue to decrease in the polls. I've been checking those polls every week. But I think we need to pay attention to this possible connection between Ron DeSantis and RFK Jr. Because there is something very off. We talked a little bit about this last night. Another thing to me that makes me feel kind of icky. Dennis Kucinich is RFK Jr.'s campaign manager. Dennis Kucinich's position on Israel and Palestine is the exact opposite of RFK Jr. Dennis Kucinich has been vocal about supporting the Palestinian people on the national stage. Why then is Dennis Kucinich campaign manager for someone like RFK Jr., who has that strong position when it comes to the state of Israel and seems to have no empathy or compassion for the Palestinian people? Doesn't this look weird to you guys? This don't seem strange. This doesn't make any sense. He wants to tell you, RFK Jr. wants to tell you that he's going to reform or try to dismantle the CIA. We're supposed to trust that he can do all that, or he's going to have the audacity to do that. And he can't even speak up in reference to the Palestinian people being dragged out of their homes when his campaign manager has publicly stated and backed the Palestinian people's fight. There is something weird with this campaign. I don't know what the goal really is at the end of the day. But I wouldn't be surprised if RFK Jr. will be trying to get some other type of position. Who knows? Who knows? But pay attention to the money. Pay attention to the funding. That's something I continue to stress to people. You have to pay attention to the donors. So when you have people like David Sachs, who are billionaires, and by the way, all the people who were against big money in politics, who all of a sudden are okay with RFK Jr. taking billionaire money, miss me with all of that. Because that means you are infatuated with a personality of the politician instead of being infatuated with their policies and their morality. And if you are focused on, oh, this person is so awesome, and you've fallen in love with the politician, and you're so blinded to the fact that you can't focus on where the money is coming from, or you're making excuses as to where the money is coming from, there is something off. There's something off here. And I'm seeing it all over. Okay. Billionaire money is still a fucking problem. I don't know how else to say it, but it's still a problem. And people telling you like, oh, it's okay. It doesn't really matter where the money comes from. He needs the money to be competitive. No, he doesn't. Bernie Sanders showed you that you don't. Sanders showed you that you can run a grassroots campaign and still have the most money out of everybody running and build a movement across this country. He showed you you can do that. So all the people making excuses from where the money is coming from, let me show you the guy I'm talking about, David Sachs. Let me show you where that money coming from. Hold up. Because I knew this guy was sus. Let me pull this up here. David Sachs. So I'm going to pull up his account so you can see who I'm referring to. He's a billionaire. He's also one of those, Bitcoin people. So this is David Sachs. Let me pull up, make this larger. This is David Sachs. Okay. You'll see him sometimes in these Twitter spaces with Elon Musk. Like a couple minutes ago, I saw him in a Twitter space with Elon Musk and Vivek, right? So he's the VC at Craft Ventures, right? He's one of the hosts for the All In podcast, and he was the founder of Call In. This is the guy who founded Call In. Okay? He's a billionaire, another San Francisco billionaire. And this is who RFK Jr. and Ron DeSantis are getting some of their money from. Billionaire money. And more people need to call this out. Now I'm going to say another thing too. I've noticed these Twitter spaces that Elon Musk is hosting for these candidates. Why is this not being offered to all the candidates? Why is it only candidates that seem to be on the right? Twitter space was with Ron DeSantis, right? There was a Twitter space with earlier today, or actually it might be still going on, Vivek. Okay. Where's the Twitter space for Cornel West? I haven't seen the Twitter space for Marianne Williamson. Whether you agree with these campaigns or not, something is off here. And then they had a Twitter space with RFK Jr. In fact, he publicly invited RFK Jr. to the Twitter space on Twitter. What is happening here? This guy and Elon Musk. Let me see. Is that Twitter space still here? Let me see. I don't know if they show it now. I can't see it on call. Hold on. Sometimes you can't see it on the desktop. I don't know. Well, damn. Just in, U.S. sends $345 million in weapons to Taiwan. What do you see? You see what's happening? All this money going out the door.